There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. And there's not a nice way to say what happened to Dinah, and there shouldn't be. Prince Shechem raped Dinah. And so King Hamor, he doesn't even rebuke his son for what he did, and he doesn't even try to correct him. All he does is he tries to appease him. And Prince Shechem here, he doesn't have any problem telling his father what he did, and he had no shame in this. And then he tells his father what he wants him to do. In fact, he wants his father to use his kingly influence to get Dinah to be given to him as a wife. And the Bible never tells us here what Dinah thinks or how she felt about her attacker or about anything that she's gone through or anything from her perspective. All we hear here is what Shechem thinks and how Shechem feels, because this is all about Shechem. But the passage does say that Shechem, that he spoke kindly to Dinah. And I guess that's better than being, beaten before you're molested. But we don't know how Dinah felt. She may honestly could have liked him because, he was probably popular, because he is a prince. And it may be like one of our rock stars or a famous celebrity, because he is the prince of the land. And Dinah, she's young. She doesn't have much experience in life. But even if she did like him, I don't like him. And it says that Jacob, that he found out. And I think the only way that Jacob could have found this out was by Dinah herself, of her telling her father. So I believe that Dinah was a very brave young woman. And this is without any type of support like you'd have nowadays. There was no Me Too movement or any type of thing like that. And I believe that Dinah being raised in Jacob's family, Dinah was protected and that she was sheltered. And she probably had never heard of this happening to anyone before. But if you've noticed in this whole chapter, God hasn't spoken to Jacob, not even once. In fact, God's name isn't even mentioned in this chapter, because Jacob here, he's not hearing from God anymore, because Jacob, he's walked away from God's will. And it's not that he doesn't believe him anymore, but because he doesn't hear from him anymore, all he can do is use his own wisdom here. And just because Jacob is silent here, and we don't see him getting mad, and we don't see what he's going to do, that doesn't mean that Jacob is indifferent. There's just nothing that he can do, or at least yet, because everybody's away. They're all out tending the sheep, and they're away from the home. And when these type of things happen to a family, there's not always really a lot that can be done, because what's been done, well, it can never be undone, no matter how badly you wish it could be. And a lot of times after this initial grieving, you end up thinking more like, okay, well, where do we go from here? And so Jacob, he could have very well asked Dinah, well, how do you feel? How do you feel? What would you want to do in this situation? And when King Hamor and Prince Shechem, and they come to ask Jacob for Dinah to be his bride, and which I believe is very bold, Jacob could have asked Dinah and says, well, do you have any feeling toward this man? Dinah, do you have any desire to marry Prince Shechem and to be a princess among these people? Because naturally, Dinah, she would want to marry somebody someday, but we don't know. We don't know how she felt. And when Jacob's sons were told what happened to Dinah, they were outraged, and they should have been outraged. But they didn't declare their outrage publicly. They kept it a secret, and they acted deceptively. They didn't declare war with these people. In fact, what they declared peace. And they convinced these men that there was a way to have a treaty with them and for Prince Shechem to be able to become a part of their family, and that they could all become one people. And so they were willing to make a contract with these people in Shechem, but that's only if all the men would become physically like they were, that they would all become circumcised. And Jacob's sons, they had absolutely no right to make any kind of deal with these people, because this is not of God. This is deception. Because these Hivites, well, they served different gods. And these people, they were not part of God's plan for making a people for himself. They didn't have God's approval. But you can see there is a big lack of leadership of Jacob in the family matters, because he just stood by while his sons made these arrangements with King Hamor and Shechem. And it's because these brothers, Simeon and Levi, they didn't think that their father's response was strong enough, because they didn't think he did anything. Because apparently, the way it looks here is that Jacob did give Dinah to Shechem to be his wife, because we later find Dinah in Shechem's house. And Jacob here, he is totally unaware of his son's plans. So it was not only the city of Shechem that was deceived, but Jacob was also deceived. And the only way that King Hamor and Prince Shechem could sell that whole city of men to agree to the terms of being circumcised was to appeal to their greed. And by pointing out that Jacob, that he had a lot of herds, and if they were willing to be one people with them, all those herds, they would be theirs too. Because Jacob really had a lot of herds. Because even Esau's present, which was just a little portion of what he had, was 580 animals. And that was 7 years ago. So he probably had way much more now. Jacob was probably wealthier and had more possessions than any of the men of Shechem. And Simeon and Levi, they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that circumcision would disable those men. And they even know when it would disable those men, because their father had bought adult servants before, because he was buying those servants even way back there with Laban. And under the Abrahamic covenant that Jacob was a part of, all Jacob's male servants purchased with money, they had to be circumcised. And so they've seen this effect on men their whole life, and they knew exactly when to attack. And they did attack, and they attacked those men of Shechem when they were at their very weakest. And even though Prince Shechem, he was wrong in what he did to Dinah, and no one could ever justify what Shechem did to Dinah, but even if Shechem was to be punished, and even if it was according to the Jewish law, which came later, that punishment would not have been death. According to the Jewish law that came about, Shechem would have been forced to marry the girl if he wanted to or not, and that was only if the father would permit it. And he would also be forced to pay a large sum of restitution, a payment to the father of the victim. But that punishment wouldn't have been death, But these sons of Jacob, they're very cruel and they're very violent. And they don't even just take out their vengeance on Prince Shechem. They murdered a whole city of innocent men, and they stole everything they had. They stole their herds, and they stole all their animals, and they enslaved all their women and their children. And they did all of this under the deception of peace. And this is way much worse than Shechem had ever done. They harmed many more innocent people. And this is what I see as one of the most tragic parts of the story, is that while Simeon and Levi were murdering all these men in Shechem, well, then they walk into Shechem's house. And we see that Dinah, that she was also living there, which means there wasn't an arrangement made and that Dinah was Shechem's wife. And we really never ever knew how Dinah felt about Prince Shechem. Maybe she loved him, and maybe she could understand their culture, and maybe she forgave them. Because you have to remember, the Bible does say that he was the most honorable man in that house. And it does say that he loved her and that he spoke kindly to her. So now she's being ripped out of her husband's arm, and he's being murdered by her brothers. And Jacob, he knew none of this was happening. Jacob is not a part of this plan at all. This act of deception and murder, Jacob is absolutely innocent. And we'll hear later that at Jacob's deathbed that he will curse Simeon and Levi. He'll curse their anger and he'll curse their cruelty. And he does not want his honor to be associated with them. And he's talking about this very event. And we can see even when Jacob does go to rebuke these sons for what they've done, because these people, they brought a death sentence upon their whole family. Because now Jacob, he's expecting a retaliation from all the other Canaanite tribes, because these are really extended family to these Hivite people. They're all Canaanites. But Jacob here, he's a foreigner. He's not one of them. And Jacob, he's not a nation. He's small. He's just a man with a growing family, with a few kids and some servants. And in this type of patriarchal society, to carry out an act of war like this or an act of murder, it would have never been up to Simeon and Levi. It wasn't their choice in the matter. This would have been Jacob's choice. So they've overstepped their authority in their father's house. And these arrogant boys, which are really men, and they're violent men, they just look at their father and they don't even receive their father's rebuke. They wouldn't take their correction. All they did is just justify themselves. They justified all these murders. And it's all because one man mistreated their sister. And for that one act, that one man, they murdered and victimized a whole city. Way many more people than Shechem ever victimized in his whole lifetime. You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.